Let's bring in Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Marsha, good to see you. Let's go back to that moment. I know Marjorie Taylor Greene interrupted the president, and eventually he mentioned Laken Riley's name. He was not going to talk about her last night unless Marjorie had brought it up. But when she brings it up, and he has the name in front of him because it's on a button, he gets her name wrong. How disrespectful is that to her memory and to her family and to his open border policy?
It is disrespectful to her, her memory, her family, to the people who knew and loved her. It is disrespectful to the American people, and it's also so disrespectful to the unfortunate thousands of angel parents that we now have in this country. People that have lost loved ones because someone who was illegally in the country committed a crime, was not deported. And you know, Sean, when you think about it, the system really failed Laken Riley twice. Once in New York, when he should have been deported for endangering a child. He is not. He goes to another sanctuary city, Athens, Georgia. He is booked for theft. They let him go. Police aren't cooperating with ICE. And then he commits this murder. And this person, I found it so interesting. They were saying, well, we generally use the term undocumented and not illegal. But you know what? The term is illegal immigrant, and this person was documented because he had been granted parole by Joe Biden and his administration. And getting that parolee status is important. You get a work permit, you get benefits. And Joe Biden has paroled more than 200 times as many people as either Barack Obama or Donald Trump paroled. They would parole about 5,600 a year. Joe Biden paroled 800,000 in 2022, which one of this individual that killed Laken Riley, and then 1.2 million in 2023, far more than anybody.
I hope the president keeps using the word illegal, Senator, because it's an admission that millions have broken the law and that he, as the commander-in-chief, is not enforcing the law by letting them in. And it's a reminder to everybody that he is not holding up his oath of office. But from angel parents to Gold Star parents, a Gold Star dad, there's only so much of Biden's rambling nonsense that anyone can take. And last night, Steve Nakui, Gold Star father of fallen Marine Kareem Nakui, who was killed during Biden's successful Afghanistan withdrawal, reached his limit.
The year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. The biggest increase in history. It was then.
The Capitol Police arrested Steve Nakui, slapped him with misdemeanor charges. Those Gold Star families are still waiting for answers and an apology from that president for closing Bagram, releasing that suicide bomber who killed those 13 service members. And Joe Biden did not refer to the Afghanistan pullout at any point during that 68-minute speech last night, Senator.
He did not. And of course, we all know that the debacle in Afghanistan and all that happened there and the lack of sympathy for those families is something that the American people noted, because that is when Joe Biden's popularity, his favorable rating, went under 50%, and it has never recovered. And after Afghanistan, then you had the aggression with China. You have what happened in Ukraine and continues to happen. You have a very boisterous Iran, and then you have all of their proxies, and you have October 7th in Israel. Every bit of this is on Joe Biden's watch. And I thought it was so interesting that whether it was responding to immigration or the border, Joe Biden really came across as the angry old guy. last night as he talked about these issues. I felt like he reminded me of Walter Matthau in Grumpy Old Men. You know, he wanted to fuss about Snicker bars, but he wouldn't come out and address Laken Riley or the border issue or the families, the Gold Star families about Afghanistan. He wanted to stand up there and yell at people and give a campaign speech. It was the wrong time, the wrong tenor, and the wrong audience for that.
You know, Marsha, Steve McCooey should be extended grace. Joe Biden should say,
absolutely.
Listen, leave him alone. I know he's stressed out. I know he lost 2 of his sons because of what happened at Abbey Gate. I don't expect Joe Biden to do that. But I've been in the chamber with you. I don't recall other outbursts that have happened, whether it was Barack Obama or Donald Trump, of folks being charged with misdemeanors. I think this is unique, and maybe specifically because he was a Gold Star father. But I do want to move on to this, Senator. Once Trump accepts the nomination this summer, he should begin receiving classified briefings from the intelligence community. That's what happens. But former CIA Director John Brennan says this time Trump might not be getting the entire picture. Watch this.
Trump. Now, I'm pretty certain that my former intelligence colleagues will provide briefings that are not going to do any type of damage to sources and methods in terms of providing information to Donald Trump that he could misuse.
Marsha, these are the same people that concocted Russia collusion hoax against a sitting, duly elected President Donald Trump and tried to have him removed from office. But they're not going to give briefings to Donald Trump after the nomination at the convention?
Well, that is what they are saying. But this is, you know, this type of conduct is why John Brennan had his security clearance pulled in 2018. And for what he did with cooking up the 50 former security professionals on that letter about, oh, this stuff with Hunter Biden's laptop looks like it could be Russian disinformation, and trying to purposefully and intentionally mislead the American people. You know, Sean, this is one of the reasons when people have been in service in the United States in some agency and received a top secret clearance, even though the term of that security clearance may go past their service with the United States, those security clearances, they need to be recalled.
Yes.
Those individuals do not need to have those security clearances. And John Brennan is the poster child for why you do not want to have individuals with those clearances.
Indeed, Senator. Thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure. Senator.
Absolutely.
Marsha Blackburn. Thank you.
Thank you, Marsha.